My volume.
Yep. All right. Good morning, commissioners. And over to you, Chair Harrington.
Good morning and welcome to the Thursday, November 7th, 2020. I was looking at packets as it was previously. The last email that we got didn't update the rolling agenda.
That's why I'm mentioning it to you now.
So is it added to the 19th or?
It is on December 10th.
Okay, I hadn't gotten to December yet. Okay. Facilities. Fleet and parks, what?
The capital funding. So this is a follow-up to your facility condition index
Got it.
discussion and starting to plan for
the
our
CIP.
CIP.
Okay,
next year.
so we're going to come back to November if we could. Yes, ma'am.
I corrected the last time. I'm leave the next day, so I am.
Oh, you leave
on
the 20th?
Yes, I am.
Oh.
Here on the 20th,
Oh.
right, the 19th. So I just was double checking off.
Thank you very much. I thought you were out that whole week, so
No,
my
no.
mistake. Got it. Thank you very much. Okay, good. That builds my confidence. Okay, and reminder, we are not having board meetings the week of Thanksgiving. And then Shazam, it's December already. I just can't get over the fact. Yes, sir.
The Council of Forest Trust Lands breakfast at AOC.
Uh-huh.
I have on my calendar that you're going to attend that. Is that correct?
I cover for you every year, pal, while you're on vacation.
It's not going to be nearly as exciting as we thought it was, but yes, I appreciate that. I can log in from on Zoom.
I don't know that they do that for that meeting.
Yeah, I asked him. I asked
Okay.
Brendan yesterday. I can, but I just wanted to confirm you were going to be there, and that's
Yep,
fine with me.
I am absolutely going to be there, and you're going to make sure to touch bases with me before you go on vacation.
Yeah, I got an update yesterday in our small table meeting, so I'll be glad to do that.
Yeah.
You and I have a one-on-one
Tomorrow.
tomorrow. Yeah,
Yeah.
so we'll do that.
Okay.
Okay.
You're going on vacation soon. Good for you.
A week from Saturday. Who's
Yeah.
coming?
Awesome. Okay, and then Shazam, it's December and Commissioner Willie's vacation will be over.
Thank you. It was fun, I'm sure.
At least sunny and warm, we hope.
Right.
For a second.
So, unlike most years, we have 3 Tuesdays in December here in 2024. Let's see, we've got a lot of work each of those days. So there wasn't anything specifically I was going to highlight on December. We do, oh, let me back up. Hopefully by now, you have a hold on your Outlook calendar for Thursday, November 14th, 6 to 8 p.m. for the Senate District 17 appointment. We only get our full votes if y'all show up.
Is that going to be a Zoom meeting? Are we going to meet in person?
Oh, no, it's not in person. It's a joint meeting between Multnomah County and Washington County. So I believe it's a Google Meet, or is it WebEx?
Okay.
Anyway,
All right.
unless Kevin's magically gotten them to use our Zoom.
I have not got them to use our Zoom, but I did get an update. I saw an email from Multnomah last night that they are going to do a hybrid meeting. They are going to offer in person down at the Multnomah building and online for us.
Online sounds pretty good to me.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know that I'll have time to schlep down into Portland for it.
Well, I have a 4 o'clock to 5:30 meeting. So yeah, Zoom is the only way I could do that.
Yep. Yep. So it is 6 to 8. Go from there. And now back to December. I think the meetings that we have are all pretty set and clear. Do we have any idea yet when we're going to have the AOC District 8 meeting?
No, I haven't. I have not talked to Mallory about that, but that was on my calendar.
Election results are certified 28 days after election. So what does that take us to? Do you remember, Mr. Nelson?
We can.
If you could narrow it down versus
I will.
having all this, that'd be really
I
great.
will do that. And I don't know that to have the initial discussion, we have to wait till elections are certified. Well, actually,
It'd be great if you could figure it out and get it set up.
I will.
Okay, great. And then by the December roundtable, I hope that we will have rolling agendas propagated out through March. But as you can see just from January, that we've got a lot of stuff going on. Which brings me to the roundtable planning sheet. We have a lot of demands on our time, so things are a little tight. I think this will be the last roundtable that only meets in the morning for a while. December 5th will be a very full day. We have the caucus breakfast from 7:45 to 9. I'm urging everyone to show up at 7:45 to get their breakfast because our excellent team has an hour worth of content. Then we will start the meeting at 10. We'll need a couple of hours to go over some additional data learnings and discussion around budget, and then we'll have our annual discrimination and harassment training for 2 hours. So it's a very full day. Then January 9th is another very full day. We have training in the morning, and then I managed to put together 5 hours of content for a 4-hour afternoon. So I gotta figure that out. So the meeting's going to go till 5 that day. So please set your schedules accordingly. we're going to, good morning, Commissioner Rogers, welcome. And then in February, we will have both a CWS Learning Day as well as a Board of Commissioners Day. The date for our roundtable needs to change, likely February 13th. If you could please get that worked out. Similarly, in April, we also need to change that date as well. But back to January. Yep. So for April, pencil in April 10th for yourselves. For January, we've been through a very full presidential campaign of a lot of promises and trends for next year. And if those things are indeed acted upon, we may see a change to federal grant programs, federal policies, federal pass-through funds to counties from the state. So as such, as a means to prepare for that and be thinking about that in advance of our proposed budget cycle, I have worked with Aaron Doyle to ask for our federal lobbying team, Van Scoyac, to support us in a supplemental roundtable in January. So please pencil in, or for now, it's a quick task this week for Aaron Doyle to touch bases with Van Scoyac and for us to figure out if it's going to occur Thursday, January 16th or Thursday, January 23rd. It would only be a morning meeting, but that would be the best time and date thus far. Okay? Oh. Planning. Such is the additional duties as assigned. Then, checking my notes, I think I went over everything, both in number 1 and number 2. Any other thoughts, ideas?
We're going to put NACO on this as a tentative anywhere. I have that as
It's March 1st through
March.
14th.
yeah, March 1 to 4 is NACO.
First, yeah, 1 to 4.
That on here.
I got the digits right. I just said them wrong.
Long siege. I don't know if I could be in December. It's that long.
I don't have a set of rolling agendas that take us out that far. Do you?
No, I just wondered if that was somewhere in the planning process, because I see that the Saturday to a Tuesday night. Basically.
Yeah, the 1st through the 4th. Yeah.
Okay, we'll have to look to see if that's worth the trip.
Yeah, I only know they've opened registration. I don't know that I've seen a calendar yet for it. Has anybody else noticed it?
That's way too early for an agenda item, but yeah. I think it's on mine. Yeah, it's on mine as just a hold.
And it is a long state ledge session. So that will be going on as well. So while our AOC steering committees have figured out their agendas, I can't remember. Is anybody from GR here? No, that's okay. I can't remember. We've got plenty of time to figure it out, but I can't remember what date bills drop. so from the county side of things, with our agenda, we know what we're asking for. And we know what AOC is on board with, but I don't know what we'll see from legislator bills. Yeah, we'll figure it out. So, go from there. Does anyone have anything else you want to highlight? Okay. On the January planning, might you be open to us having just a half-hour lunch that day with advance notice?
Sure. Works for me.
Would that work for staff, Ms. Angie?
Yes.
Okie dokie. There's a lot to land between now and the end of the year. And then ramping up to 2025. I just can't get over the fact it's 2025 already. Oy, oy, oy. All righty. Well, we're way early. Sorry about that. I thought it would just take us longer. We better refine this stuff. Evan, I guess you're right. It's back to the 15 minutes. And we didn't need the separate meeting topics one at all, unless, of course, I have forgotten to highlight something I needed to highlight. Takes a lot more work to figure this stuff out in between. So maybe that's why I estimate it the way it is. Okay. Well, Ms. Angie, if you're ready for budget, we could just dive right in. Or is there any other staff we need to give a heads up to?
Ann Ober is on her way. She had outside the building commitment this morning, so she's about 3 minutes out. So we can go ahead and get started. Just know she will be coming in here and being also part of the presentation, or if you'd.
Well, there is always emails to draw our attention. Would commissioners like to take an email break for 5-10 minutes?
Great. And then maybe for staff, we can.
Why don't we start at 9:30?
That sounds good. Then we can take our time to update because staff are moving fast, just like the board is. And the title of this presentation is CLT presentation, and that was to our directors yesterday. But this is presentations to the board. So we'll make sure that's updated correctly. So I apologize for that.
Hey, it's a one Washington County approach. We're doing it together.
Help each other.
Okay, so we're on a break till 9:30. Thanks, folks.
Welcome back, commissioners, and back over to you, Chair Harrington.
Thank you, Clerk Moss. We have a full complement of commissioners, and we are going to dive into our budget presentation. Before we do, I have a quick question for Ms. Angie. The ARPA revenue, we have all that, right? It's just a matter of obligating it or spending it out. Okay, great. Okay. I don't know why I was nervous about that, but anyway, okay.
It's a 2 a.m. question.
That you always have to remember to write down, or you may forget by the time you wake up.
So this is preparations for the next proposed annual budget.
Yes, and I would like to ask that Ann Ober, Steve King, Joe Nelson, and Lisa Tackage all join me in this presentation.
So the tall people get the short chairs.
Yes.
She's tall.
Thank you.
You can always move over if you guys want to sit down too. Okay, one of you has the clicker, right?
Sure.
Oh, I do. Yikes. This may
Hey,
be dangerous.
come on, Washington County approach.
Well, I'll be handing off the clicker too. So good morning, Board of Commissioners, and I just want to appreciate Clerk Moss and Chuck, whomever changed the title of the slide, so we make sure we're presenting to the right audience today. Thank you for making that clerical change. So the purpose of today's discussion is just a review of our upcoming roundtable schedule relative to fiscal focus. Also, looking closer at our strategic investment program projections, and just a reminder of policy 405, which guides our strategic investment program reserves. Further discussion on general fund pressures and forecasts. So now we're bringing into the SIP projections into our forecast, and then starting the discussion relative to budget reduction preparation. We are not prepared today to discuss general scenarios of what would be asked of departments, but more so sharing with you today what is the budget shortfall that we're looking at. And then share with you the draft fiscal year budget principles and priorities. You will see in that there's some strike-throughs of what staff did not feel may be relevant this year. We have not spent significant time making our recommendations, or nor has there been time to get input from the board. So this is just giving you the principles and priorities that we can have further discussion in December, and then finalize or affirm those budget principles and priorities in January. So here is just once again laying out kind of what the focus areas are into January. I will note in your email box, there are 2 links to the State of Oregon's State Economic Forecast. The first link is the full 80-page document. The second link is actually the PowerPoint. What I found helpful in the PowerPoint is it brings out to a larger viewing the graphs that are embedded within the forecast itself. We're not going to spend time today talking about that, but that's just in your inbox for your review. We have added it to the December 5th meeting.
Doesn't look too bad though.
So just as a reminder, we do have a SIP financial policy that guides our utilization of SIP and our reserves. The board adopted this policy update about a year and a half ago. I don't have the actual date at the tip of my fingers. And this policy the purpose of this policy was to guide how we use SIP reserves. If the board may recall, we had to make some prior year budget adjustments because we were overusing SIP reserves for ongoing operational expenses. And with that, I'm going to give the clicker to Joe Nelson to talk through our Intel SIPs, specifically focused on the 2005 SIP, which will be expiring in 2025.
Okay, thank you. Just for the record, my name is Joe Nelson. I'm the Director of Assessment and Taxation, Elections and Recording. This slide, I need to start with a disclaimer, but for clarity, we're talking about the 2005 Intel SIP, that's Strategic Investment Program. Sometimes it's called SIP, SIP, or the full name. This one is 2005. It's a contract, so I have to have a disclaimer. The disclaimer has to do with the information that myself and the assessment and taxation team work with. That information is confidential. There is an authorization to disclose, and we have very strictly adhered to that. What I can talk about today is very high-level information, the information that we bill and the public sees. So just kind of a point of reference, a lot of the questions of why I can't get into, because that would be the details that is confidential. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking about what the impact of the 2005 expiring this year will be on next year. I have to make some assumptions because there are many things we just don't know. I have to assume that the values that we know this year carry forward next year. There are flat years in the past. There may be flat years in the future. We don't know if they're going to build more, bring in more, move things out. We don't know. The second assumption is going to be the rates. I don't know what the tax rates are going to be next year until the elections roll those out. We don't know the rates, so I'm going to have to assume that the rates stay static. And the last thing is the projections are going to be in very rounded numbers in the millions. That's just for clarity. Next slide is going to be this graph. To understand this graph, what I'm looking at is the very top numbers in blue. Those are the years. The 24-25 year, that's this year, that's the current year. We're going to be billing these numbers, or we're going to be taxing for these numbers. The black arrows in the middle move us over to next year, 25-26. On the left side, you see that there's three areas that are impacted. There's taxes, the 2005 SIP, and the 2014 SIP. Probably easiest to start with the middle line, the 2005 SIP, because that's the easy one. That's the one that's going away. This year, we billed in assessment taxation $39.4 billion in fees. Okay, when I look at the county's portion of it, it's roughly about 70%. So the county received $27 million out of that $39 million. Next year, it goes away. We don't bill. There's no fees. It goes to zero. That's kind of the known. That's the easy piece. The assets we're assuming are going to become taxable next year after this expires. So if we look at the very top line in the tax area, 2005 SIP, this year the taxes were about $2.5 million. Washington County's portion of that was about $400,000. With the expiration, the assets that we currently know about, they would become taxable at about $73 million. So $2.5 million to $73 million. The county's portion would be about 11.9 of that. The county actually, that's the county overall rate. What the county receives, 16.25%. So we're using that just for our projections. All other taxes, Intel has a lot of different accounts, so I just put that all into just one line item, and that's staying static for our assumptions. So 29 million, 4.8 to the county, that's this year and next year. That's just an assumption there. The bottom piece is the 2014 SIP that has a minor impact, contractual impact to that. But the bottom line is, when you look at what A&T will be collecting, it's going to move up overall for the entire community. All districts, all 64 districts are going to move up from 128 million to 162 million. It's going to be a very big impact for all of the districts. Washington County receives, it's a shift from 70% down to 16%. So the change for Washington County is impacted, and we're going to have a loss or a reduction of $14.1 million. So that's just a percentage impact from SIP to tax, the shifting. Should I pause and any questions while we're looking at this?
You've definitely demonstrated what the shift is, what the change is, and how other taxing districts will see an increase year over year. And you've been very clear about with the expiration of the 2005 going away, the impact of all of that, leaving us with a difference of 14.1 million. So I think you've done a good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Roy.
Oh, thank you. First of all, congratulations on your election the other day.
Well, thank you.
Fairly seamless. I didn't want you to get away from the table without saying something like that. That's very good. I asked, Greg Munn came with some questions and I asked some questions back. Unfortunately, he left before I got answers. I sent that to the board and others on October the 18th, and it's just gathering information for all of you who are going to be here dealing with the 25, 26. And I described it as a cliff that was happening. And that cliff was, I knew that the SIP was disappearing and I had 27 million in my mind. So that's about what you have. And you're having assumption that about the AV will pop back up about 16 million. I'm not discussing 14, but in my mind, that'd be probably $12 million delta. That was the cliff. Is there any on the 25, 26 that AV pop up ability? And you're going to say, yes, they can always do this, but the likelihood, can they appeal the assessments? Because they're going to say, we've got a lot of equipment that might pop back up at the AV reassessment. Or the life in this equipment is about 18 months, 24 months. We're well beyond that. So I'm trying to understand in my mind, and yet don't expect you to have a perfect answer. It's just information. Could Intel, in the case, appeal or tax and say, I don't agree with that AV? What would be the grounds to do that? And then what might be that delta? Any wild idea?
That's a good question. Intel, we can't really predict what they're going to do. They have a legal right to appeal. Okay, they have the right to do many things that we just don't know about. Like I was saying earlier, it's not only just appealing, they could add more, they could move it out. There's nothing there on January 1st, nothing taxable. I mean, it could be any scenario. We don't know. But yes, appealing is one of those options that they do.
Our worst case is $27 million. Our best case is no appeal and the AV comes back and it's about $11, $12 million delta difference. It's drop.
That could happen.
My thinking was correct. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Terry.
Well, I just remember last year, 23, 24, we got a little bit of a positive surprise. And we got a $18 million bump in SIP that we didn't anticipate. How does that play into why did that happen?
Okay. Currently, what we're working on is the 2014 SIP. And this gets into some of the things that I can't really talk about because we're getting into some of the details about what they're building, what they're adding on, the cumulative investment, but it's all in the 2014. So they could, and it's at their option, when they do something right now, it's not on the 2005 anymore. So that bottom line, or not the 2014 line, that could fluctuate greatly.
Could I put this differently? With fiscal year 24, 25, the actuals versus the assumption that we experienced provided more SIP revenue than we had initially assumed / forecasted.
Right.
Yes.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So can I, because
You're not trying to get to the
Well,
whys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
so how we handled that one-time increase that was above projections is consistent with the policy. And that's why I led with the policy. We use those above unanticipated revenues for one-time expenditures. The board had that discussion in January of 2024. Thank you. Sorry. During budget conversations, I get sometimes my years. And those dollars were allocated to the gap in the ERP and the critical facilities. So one-time expenditures, they were not applied to our operating budget. So this goes consistent to attempting to keep stabilization in the operating revenues and separate out one-time revenues.
Yeah, no, I get that. I was just looking at this and saying, presumably, we can take this and we can spread this out 26, 27, 27, 28. It'd be really, really rough. But at some point in time, we should be doing that because as I'm hearing, there is a cliff out there. So yeah, I guess that's just what I'd like to see. And like I said, to be estimated numbers and the fact that we got more than we projected and we used it for that purpose, that's great. That helped a lot.
I think if I understand what you're saying, and I don't label it a cliff, just that we knew at some point the agreement would end. It ended, and the new one activated. And I think what you're getting at is we have a base assumption. That's what is represented here with 24, 25, and then into 25, 26. And you're suggesting that we just continue that same assumption out for assumed forward fiscal years, knowing that the actuals could come in differently and that
Yeah.
we'll use the policy.
And we can certainly be conservative, very conservative in our projections out there. I think where I'm going with this is that because we have continuing budget woes, I'm going to want to see projected revenue sources out more than just a few years, maybe to 2030, so that we can begin and, I mean, I want to make sure that I say this in a positive way, that we are looking at what's coming and be able to anticipate any service decisions that we may have to make this year and next year, that we've got a long-term perspective on that.
This will relate to our supplemental roundtable in January as well.
Okay.
Because there's our general property tax as a revenue source, but then there are also pass-through grants from Fed through state and so forth that we need to address. We need to scope out some scenarios looking from 2025 forward. Because remember, Congress has only passed a continuing resolution. They have to act on it again in December and then forward. So from a federal standpoint, we're looking at uncertainty and then beyond.
Yeah, and again, I guess my thought about this, and I haven't put this on paper yet, but is going to be a fairly high level shot out there, but I just need to know what the big picture is like.
Yeah.
I think we need to do that to make sure that we're not handcuffing the future. I mean, I think that just understanding and making sure that we've got a clear understanding of what, granted it's fuzzy, but
We don't want to overextend ourselves.
exactly. Or, like I said, handcuff the future.
Joe, I had one other follow-up, and my earlier analysis was strictly on 5, but since you brought in 14, can you share with us, when does a 14
Expired.
expire? Yeah.
The 2014 refers to when the contract was developed. The first year that they actually invested was 2017-18. So we have to add 30 years to that.
So it's
So it's,
some ways out.
yes.
It was
Two
two,
15s
Yes.
there were 2 15s.
yeah.
It's actually in 3 investments with a maximum of 2 15-year periods of 30 years.
Hey, Brian,
And it's 100 billion.
but it's not a one issue, is it? Wasn't it layered?
Yes.
And so it put it out as one number is not exactly correct. Is there a series of these that are expiring?
Now we're getting into some things that I'm hesitant. I'd have to look at county council to find out how much of this contract that I can discuss.
It's not important.
You can
to us.
only discuss the public parts.
Yeah.
You can only discuss the agreement that was discussed and adopted in public forums.
Thank you for being thoughtful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just remembered it wasn't one. It was,
Yes.
yeah.
As he said, it's 3 different payout
Different times.
at, with 2 different 15-year agreements.
Nothing immediate anyway.
But yes. Actually, this
And
is,
it's all the decisions for investments are made by the said company, not by us. We're just the receiver of the actuals.
so really good.
I like how you're using conservative assumptions. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. The next slide is actually, there's a really good discussion just now. And this slide emphasizes with history why what you were just talking about is important. This is not our first SIP. We started with 1994 Intel. It was a smaller amount, 2.3 billion for Ronler Acres, 750 million for Aloha. That has expired, obviously. The 1999 Intel SIP for 12.5 billion, much bigger. This current one that's expiring is 25 billion. Their first year, notably, was 2010. So you add 15 years to that investment. And if you notice, Genentech, much smaller, 250 million, they also expired this year, but it's a very small in relation. It's much less impactful. They both expired this year because they both started their investment the first year. It doesn't mean they wrote the contract in the same year, though. And the one that will remain is the 2014 at 100, and that's the one that we were just talking about. With that, any questions before I pass the clicker?
So this all gives us a sense for the types of impacts that we're expecting. Yes.
I'm sorry, I do have a question.
Sure.
And it's, I don't need or want an answer right now, but are we considering a story that we tell about the SIPs that are retiring right now? And the reason I say that is that we look to the future. I'm just thinking that it would be nice to be able to tell the story to the public about what the benefits were and how it progressed as we look at the future and the possibility of additional situations. I'm just thinking about the communication piece.
Yeah, and that would come into the actual budget document, and we're just starting to work on that now.
Okay.
We had a conversation with Philip yesterday about starting that messaging. But I do think that it's a critical part of what you're about to see. So making sure that we tell that story is
In arrears.
is a base of our discussion.
I think we're doing very little storytelling.
Okay.
This board has done a phenomenal job in investing that additional SIP revenue for the benefit of our community through the new ERP and through the critical facilities. Hello, folks. We have one of the critical facilities upgrades done, and the remaining 3 are solidly under contract. What did we say about it? As an organization, zip. So what you're getting at is we need to really up our game with regard to storytelling, not just keep doing what we've been doing, because it doesn't feel up to the task of the work that we've done together.
Tanya, I have a question. I don't remember, I didn't want to scroll down the PowerPoint presentation, but could you remind me if the reserve is fully funded?
The SIP reserve? The SIP reserve is
Reserve.
not, the SIP, so the county has multiple reserves based on funding source. So I'll answer that question for the SIP reserve. The SIP reserve does not meet the SIP reserve targets, which are outlined in policy. General fund, we are in alignment with policy currently. And there's multiple funds, so I don't have all of the fund information and reserves on the tip of my fingers, but this conversation is primarily focused on SIP fund.
So the SIF fund shall maintain a minimum reserve balance. We're not meeting that.
Nope. And I want to go back and I'm going to connect to the comments I had shared before. Over the course of the last few years, we have aligned with the policy how we use SIP funds for ongoing operating costs. That policy was adopted to ensure that we have a strategy to grow into on the SIP reserves. Many times when you adopt a first policy, you're not there year one, and it takes several years to get to that target.
We kept using SIP reserves as a way to fund the gap in total revenues.
And we've stopped that practice.
Yep. And adopted a policy to make sure that we were actually creating SIP reserves and we're building those reserves.
And Commissioner, we'll show you in the slides where the total is from the point of the policy. So Steve will go over that when he's into the spreadsheets. Okay, so this is just a reminder of what goes into our 5-year forecast as the base and starting our discussions about what we are facing. So we're looking at our revenues, property tax, the SIP we've just spent a significant amount of time on, personal service costs, materials, other revenue and expenditures, that's really where the SIP is, and then other drivers and assumptions. This is a guesstimate, right? We don't have all of our income, numbers at hand. We don't have all of our expenses. We don't know what our year-end balances will be at this time. This is a projection. So what are we projecting?
Question?
Sure.
Again, this is all information gathering.
Yep.
As you know, statutorily, you have to budget personal services, material services, and capital outlay. And assumptions are just projections where you're making certain kinds of thoughts. I didn't see either here or on slide 13 anything for capital projects unless you're putting them in some other place that I don't see. Did you not make any?
Capital
Along with
projects are in their own funds. So we have different funds that are addressing the capital projects, and those are in their own funds.
I'm talking about big ones. I'm talking about tables.
Go back a slide. Sure. What is missing from this slide is reminding us and everyone that we have invested in foundation building. We now have, instead of just lists, we have a capital investment plan or a capital improvement plan, and we have activated it through multi-year investments. So that will continue. And it leverages the funds that Steve was just referring to. So there are assumptions with regard to what we activate into the CIP for each forward year.
Let me ask the question differently. CIP, different question. I'm asking about capital projects as you normally find in any government that are small in duration, everything from computers to tables to. Are they built into your assumptions somewhere? Because those aren't the big CIP projects, they're small.
Yep, I can answer that. So sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. Steve Kang from Washington County Budget Office. This particular forecast that we're discussing are SIP and general fund. General fund does have some capital outlay, and it's a very small number. If there are any funding from general fund to other capital projects, it would show up as a transfers to that fund. So those projects will be in their own funds, and then general fund would be funding through a transfers.
To answer it from the policy side, we do have things like carpet replacement if there is expected carpet replacement. There is anything that is treating our existing staff and managing the workspaces or the using spaces for regular deferred maintenance is included in your base because we do that as a part of our calculation for cost analysis to other departments. So yes, but it's not a lot of money.
Hoping it wasn't absence, you answered it, Jay.
So I want to draw the board to a future conversation that we will be having, which is scheduled for December 10th. And that is the connection of the facility condition index to the CIP program. So Commissioner Rogers, that'll get to some of your kind of questions and what you and the full board have been asking for next steps.
Okay, these are the specifics around the base pressures that we're putting into the 5-year forecast. First and foremost, we're projecting a 4.25% increase in property tax revenue. So as all of you know, 3% is generally what we're seeing because of real estate market and the increases in value in properties. But we also see some new development, and that new development is what takes us beyond that 3%. The 1.25%, as a reminder, Steve was really great at pointing this out yesterday to staff. That is new service expectations as well. So these are new homes that will require new services, and just making sure that we are providing sufficient services to meet that additional demand should be also calculated into that 1.25%. The next part is the annual CPI. Good news is that inflation is slowing. It is cooling. That doesn't mean that it's affecting everything we do equally. So just remember that in some cases, we're still seeing increases that are substantial around like concrete or around steel. But this is what generally our employees are going to start experiencing as we're looking at our cost of living index and most of our costs as a levelized percentage.
Since 2007, my first year as an elected official, we've been complaining about the cost increases for concrete and steel every year.
Yeah.
Some years have bigger blips than others, but no.
Nope. It will. No, it doesn't. The other piece, and I just want to call this out, typically people see a large number like this and they're surprised. So 10% is what we're expecting in health insurance. I actually think that's really a phenomenal number by our team.
Some agencies are dealing with much bigger.
Absolutely. So I just want to highlight the great work of our HR office and the decisions that you all have made in past years about the types of insurance plans that you are providing to employees and the choices and options that you're providing to employees. That's what kept this number down this year.
Maybe for a different conversation, and we'll see it after this enrollment period. I understand that, but I'll be interested in what the enrollment elections have looked like. What are the drivers there that will affect that?
Absolutely. I'm going to actually turn this over to the CAO.
So I want to draw your attention to page 49 of your adopted budget and what that calls to, and you don't need to remember this, commissioners, I just want to draw your attention to it. And this is part of the strategy that we are moving forward to ensure that we are competitive in the marketplace and we attract and retain quality, talented workforce moving forward. And so what this paragraph speaks to is exploring the options to address the 6% PERS pickup because we are now an outlier within the marketplace, as well as that paragraph within the budget document does point to the process which we are just starting of class and comp. Our current class and comp process and system has not been reviewed for over 20 years. It is best practice to be reviewing that on about an every 5-year basis. And that means that then it stays with market and you're able to make those increment adjustments. So I just want to point back to that document. Next slide.
And a reminder, we had a roundtable conversation about the HR transformation and class and comp on June 10th, 2024.
Before we jump into the general fund projections, I think it is important that we discuss about SIP fund and how it relates to the general fund projections. So strategic investment fund revenues are put into their own fund. So it has their own fund. It does impact general fund projections, but it's not one-to-one relations. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands. Also, the column 24-25 is a budget. And the revenue that you see up there would not line up to Mr. Nelson's slide for 24-25. We left it at budget because of the purpose of the general fund forecast. Whether that number changes or not has a little impact on it. So I just wanted to make sure everyone understands.
Steve, sometimes these charts confuse me. For 21-22, 22-23, and 23, well, no, for those two, you're representing the actuals.
Correct.
What I'd like to know is, what was the adopted number compared to the actual?
We can add that
Okay,
on the slide.
for all columns, for those 3 columns.
Yeah, we can, would it be better to show you budget versus actual column instead of just showing the actual number?
I want both,
Both.
what we adopted
Mhm.
and then what the actual was.
Very good. We'll add those in.
Yeah, we'll develop that and we'll send that in a follow-up email to the board.
So 2 lines that you want to focus on is the yellow highlighted line, which is the transfer to general fund. That's what gets transferred over to general fund as a part of their own revenues. And another line that I want to focus is the ending fund balance. As you can see, fiscal year 21-22, we were down to roughly about $10 million. And fast forward to unaudited 23-24. That number has increased to $56 million. While it is financially a lot more sounding, it is not anywhere near our 3-year past reserves. So just wanted to remind everyone that we're not there yet, but we're trying to make sure that we set aside certain dollar amounts into the reserve as we can.
That ending balance is set aside for the reserve.
Yes.
And
Question.
that's
No, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
In your December meeting, is the strategy for future boards to continue just to bleed down a little bit the SIP program, or to make more immediate cuts and use the program funding up front to keep programs whole? So are you kind of smoothing it down very slowly, or are you going to say, I'm going to full fund what I need to fund, and either use new operating levies, bonding levies? I don't understand the strategy in my mind, but I'm sure you have one. I mean, why maintain $58 million in an SIP fund if you have?
Because we don't want to go back to past practice. If you look at fiscal year 21-22, where we were the past practice was trying to keep programs whole by using the SIP reserves. SIP by nature the revenues are dependent on the investments that the SIP company makes, and we can't project that. And so there is significant volatility. And if you look on the screen on fiscal year 21-22, having a $10 million ending fund balance is not, and in staff's professional opinion, good financial management for the long term. So since the crystal ball is somewhat fuzzy right now within just the marketplace, and also wanting to get to stabilization of ongoing expenditures and revenues, that's where the SIP policy came forward to the board and the board adopted the policy. And we know we're not to the policy goals yet, but we're at least getting further than we were before. The big difference between the 22, 23, 24, 25 is there was an additional emergency, I forget the actual name, I'd have to go back and look, but kind of an emergency contingency reserve fund that the board had previously set aside for SIP. So that combination of what can look like a drastic increase in the ending fund balance between 22 and 23 was the combining of those funds into one clear SIP fund.
All that, and
Yep.
I appreciate it. I guess what Commissioner Willie was saying still resonates in my mind, and that I've been looking at that too, is someday it's gonna fall off.
Mhm.
So if you had zero SIP funds going into 26, 27, what would your budget look like? And what we're doing is leading down a little bit instead of saying, well, what do we really need to do to make us whole? So it's just a decision, when you're gonna make the decision. So that's what's playing in my mind. His question was a good one.
Wait a second. Let's back up. There is an agreement in place referred to as the 2014 SIP.
Yes, 30 years.
Oh.
Yes.
That amount doesn't go to zero until the time factor ends. Is there an annual payment for some number of years or from one year to the next? Because the assumption he just made, the picture he painted is all of a sudden, surprise, it goes to zero. So it's a 15-year agreement from what you said. It was activated in 2017, 2018. So is there a minimum SIP payment that comes in each year over those 15 years?
This is something that I'm going to have to take a look at because I'm trying to figure out from the question what happens to the individual components, whether it's machinery, equipment, or buildings, land, all of that comes into play, and I need some time to take a good look at that.
Okay. Have we ever had a year where it's been zero?
No.
Great. So I'm not going to assume that for 26, 27, it goes to zero for the time being.
It won't. That's not what I was saying. What I was saying, what is the strategy for 25 years from now? And I guess the board doesn't care what they care about. To me, sustainability means if you have one-time monies, how do you use it? Guys can do what you want. I'm just saying that what's it look like? And Jerry asked a really, really good question. Then the chair asked a good question. Does it go down to zero? I don't know how that goes down. Do you keep peeling it back just a little bit each year, or you go out for the levies that you need? You know, what do you do? What's the strategy?
Given that there was no plan when we started in 2019 to address the capital needs such as an expanded jail and community correction center or take care of any of our deferred maintenance, frankly, we're still doing the foundation building for the next 5+ years. So I'm not going to worry 25 years out yet. So what this slide, I think, does do us a disservice is we make reference to, on slide 4, SIP reserve policy. Where do you see the word reserve on this slide?
It's the ending fund balance.
I
That's
know.
the equivalent. So we can
You
revise.
never use the word. That's why it happens every single time we have one of these presentations. The other thing that is very unclear, okay, great. We've talked about how we have a reserve policy and how we're trying to get to it, but I haven't heard anyone say anything about what is our target level?
That was implied, yeah, in my question as well.
Why are
Good
we
question.
leaving so many things unsaid?
Thank you for those questions and comments, and we will add those to future presentations.
Otherwise, we spend time talking about what ifs 25 years out. So,
Any other questions on this slide? Okay, jumping into the general fund forecast. So existing forecast includes all of the assumptions that is over discussed. It includes all of the pressures from the personnel cost. It's based on the unaudited 23-24 year-to-date actuals. And it also has a property tax assumptions as well as the SIP assumptions. So currently, transfer from SIP to general fund is $35.6 million. When you add all of that, we have a gap of $20.1 million
a budget gap.
budget gap. And that gap can be divided into two different buckets. We have a expenditure and revenue differences every single year that we have because of how expenditures are going up faster than the revenue growth. And that's roughly about half. And there's a 2005 SIP expiration that's going to put some pressure on the transfer over to general fund. That's roughly about the other half. So this is just showing you that how those two are bucketed. Sorry, those two slides were flipped. So this is the next slide. Any questions so far on the forecast?
Again, going back to Commissioner Willie's comment regarding the looking out a year or two. Assuming things stay the same, and they don't, I get it. But you're always going to have a delta. Not say for 26, 27, you'd still have a $20 million gap.
I'm sorry. So,
Assuming nothing changes, but in 26, 27, would you still have a $20 million gap?
it would be bigger.
Bigger.
So going to the slide, this slide, it shows you.
It's why we're talking about normalizing our services, actually.
Yeah, no, I'm just asking, so we can get to
Stay
your
within.
point, because your point's the good one. Yeah, so it would, if doing nothing, we would have and that was, I think, Jerry's point. If I missed it, I apologize, he can correct me. But if you took 26, 27, you have a bigger one. 26 and 7, that bigger one. 27 and 8, you have a bigger one. So then we have to get to the question Catherine just said. Now, what do we have to do? And now that's why it brings it back. That's the tie, that's the ribbon.
So
So
as you may recall, this is not a new project.
Yeah, that's right.
if you look at the 3-year general fund forecast, you'll see 26, 27. There's a gap between the blue bar graph and then the line graph of purple. There's a greater gap. And by the time 27, 28, if we leave it as is, general fund will become a negative fund number or reserve by the end of that year. So in order to understand what type of reductions are required, we need to look at the expenditure structure. So we have certain sectors that we have no way of being able to reduce. For example, debt payments, that can't be reduced. Another area is assessment and taxations group, and those can't be reduced without impacting the revenue that we're generating in the general fund. So when you consider all that, including WCCLS and MSTIP, that accounts for 89.5% of the total general fund expenditures that are applicable to the reductions. And if you exclude WCCLS and MISTIP, then that's only 66.1%. So what does that mean in terms of a reduction required? If you're talking about if you include the WCCLS and MISTIP into reduction scenario, then we're looking at 7.2% of expenditure reductions. And if you exclude WCCLS and MISTIP, then it's 9.8% reduction required. Any questions?
But the next line is SIP growth assumptions of 4.25. So we're talking about a delta there of 5.5, whatever it is.
That slide is just reminding that the SIP growth, we're just increasing that transfer from SIP fund to over to general fund is growing at 4.25%, which is consistent with the property tax increase. It's just an assumption.
Okay, I'm just trying to get.
But is that on the plus column? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
So to speak.
yeah, sort of. It's actually a reminder to tell them that that's what the assumption is.
Oh, okay, that's right.
So the 9.8%, going back to your previous slide, is equivalent to the 20.1 million gap.
Correct. And 7.2 is as well, if you include WCCLS and MISTIP.
Given that we're bonding 115 million, 150 million. Yeah, it means if we don't fund it, then those payments have to spread out, right?
I believe MISTIP's debt payment is less than the total amount that we're transferring out. As far as after the reductions figure, we won't know. We would have to actually look at the calculation. But I didn't think that $150 million bond was actually using all of the MISTIP transfers.
The bond does not use all of it will not, because we haven't issued the bonds yet, but it will not use all of the MISTIP. What that will do, reductions in MISTIP is spread out the most recent series beyond the 5-year period.
So I sit here today not being comfortable with including WCCLS and MISTIP in the reduction, which means that all the other departments would need to incur the 9.8% or round it up to a 10% reduction scenario, right?
Yeah, and similar to last 2 years, we would require scenarios from departments because there are some services that we can't cut at the 10% because there's mandated. So that means we would have to explore, and I'm throwing out a number here. I'm not saying, what the scenarios are, but up to potentially a 15 or 17% scenario to departments. But I'm using that because even we may have to go to that level even if WCCLS or MISTIP were included.
Well, I think this is where we have to look at, even though it's mandated, is the state mandating a service that is fully funded by our general fund property taxes, or are they underfunding? We can't just let them mandate additional service levels when our commensurate revenue level doesn't increase to meet that. That's like me spending Jerry's money. I'm going to mandate that you do X, Y, Z on your current salary, for example. It just, that isn't reasonable. And so this is where I've already asked, but you've heard me send signals in prior work sessions, budget committee meetings, roundtables, that I'm prepared for ensuring that we give direction to our legal department to deal with the state on that. Because the teeter-totter has gone completely off kilter.
I'd be remiss if I didn't comment because I've said around this table, I'm not comfortable at all taking money out of WCCLS as well as MISTIP. But if this board, and I don't know, it'd be a legal question, if they're comfortable, it may be a way to do a level of projects, fixed dollar sum by bonding, thereby freeing up the assessed value going to the general fund to solve some woes. We've done that in the past. This board did it with 150 million. If we were somehow committed to continue some bonding projects at some stated amount, what you're then doing is, I understand you're not getting all the projects, you're paying a little interest, but I don't agree that we're going to have a 2 to 4% increase in asphalt. I think it's going to continue to be 11, 12. So if this board was interested in doing something a little more creative for future misstep projects and freeing up the MSTIP and WCCLS bonded portion, we would have general fund revenues and still deliver projects and still deliver services. So I think there's ways of doing it creatively, just whether you want to do it. But that's an add-on to the chair's comment. I never felt that we ought to be taking money out of this. That'll be all your problems in 25.
So I have a question on, I'm not understanding that including the WCCLS, et cetera, at 7.2. What do you mean by including that?
If we're to include WCCLS and MISTIP into reduction scenarios.
Well, I see. So everybody shares.
Yep.
I see. So it'd be what we're talking about is a 7.2% reduction in those two funds.
Well, including everybody else.
Everybody else.
No,
Yeah.
it's in the total.
Total.
Right.
I want to say once again, we're not having a conversation that everyone is reduced by 7.2 or 9.8 because there are some areas that we are not able to due to mandates or other
So some
reasons.
are going to be 10 or 12.
And that's why we've asked for 3 scenarios in the past 2 budget years to be able to go through that process.
But excluding WCCLS and MSTIP is basically an exemption.
Yeah. And I guess what I'd like to know is, and this might be a bigger question than I mean it to be, but I'd like to know what those funds are that we cannot.
That's community service level assessment work that we've only gotten as far as we've gotten this first year, but we need to keep going.
Statutorily, take a look at look at how you're formed as a government, and if you know exactly what you'll provide, and everything else is that.
No, it's what state.
Yeah, totally. That's a better way of saying, I'm not forever getting back to that level. That'd be nothing, but that's the honest answer.
We don't have a good picture of it,
That's why
department to department.
What's the annual MISTIP, about 35 million?
No,
No, it's more than that.
Yeah,
It's
40.
it's
I
been
thought it was
40. We went, I brought the whole thing because I knew the question would come up. But frankly, we've done a ton of work to figure out the financial scenario that we need to fund for MISTIP 3D, 3E, and 3F. And boy, wouldn't it be nice to at least go through a couple of years of getting 3D and 3E done and getting going on the 3Fs.
It's around 50 million a year.
What?
It's around 50 million a year.
50 million?
48.1 to be exact.
Last year,
Wow.
yep. Yep,
Interesting. Okay.
yep, which is an increase from FY 9-10 of over 20 million. So they've been getting more than the 3% for quite some time.
I think what I'd like to also hear from Stephen the other day too, is we're bonding this 150 million because we got to backfill for all these projects before we even get to 3E. So how long is it going to be before we get to 3E? So we're probably several years after
3F.
that.
3F,
Or F,
3F,
yeah,
yes.
sorry. So we're probably, so that $48.1 million is just gonna set in a pocket someplace because we're not gonna get to those projects until we get the 150 million previous projects. Am I thinking about this correctly?
So if you
They gave us, we have that, we have those slides already because they figured out an assumed level
Mhm.
and the 150 goes out to complete those and get some of the planning going on the 3Fs, right? But then the 3F level increases with the
Yeah, and I'm saying,
construction.
so how long is this?
We have those slides. We went through all that.
I remember looking at that. I just can't remember what the timeline was on it. But anyway, so I'm just brainstorming right now. So I'll put that down on paper.
I think the way we've done it, we've maximized our shell game. We just need to let the clock tick for a little while to get some of the work done.
I would agree with that.
Okay. So my last slide is a 5-year general fund forecast. If we're to implement that $20 million reduction, I want to remind everyone that these are just the forecast based on arithmetic. So we have assumptions built in and trends. If we're to include the $20 million of reduction, this is what it looks like. But we all know that everything is dynamic. We're ever-changing environment, so we cannot predict what the 27, 28, or 26, 27 economy will look like, revenue sources and expenditures. We don't know that, but this is what it looks like as of today.
So I understand this is titled forecast with reduction, where the expenses are still greater than
Yes.
revenues, even with reduced expenditures.
So if you look at 25, 26, and 26, 27, they're about aligned, and it starts to diverge because of the growth assumption gap.
Which it has done every year for decades.
Yep.
It's not unusual.
Yes.
And it's not unusual also because our organizations are based on personnel and that's how we deliver services. And so
That's why I just feel like, okay, great, you're flashing up a chart, but there's no key message, none. So when we look back at this chart, unless we write a key message,
we'll make sure to do that in the future.
And I may be confusing two different messages here, but you've got the SIP expiration at 10.6 less property tax increase, so that's a net number, presumably. And then I go back to Joe's slide, which showed a $14 million.
Yep. Again,
So what's the?
yeah, SIP revenue goes into the SIP fund.
Mhm.
The general fund portion, 10.6, is the difference between what we assume that we're going to transfer in from 24, 25 to 25, 26. That's the transfer number difference.
I see.
It is not direct one-to-one relations to how Joe has been presenting. That's going to the SIP fund.
Okay.
where do you state what the assumption, I see on slide 13, you have transfer from SIP 35.6.
Yes.
That is based off of what formula?
There is no formula. It's an assumption that we're using that we're projecting to bring in $41.9 million and other revenues are mostly investment earnings, comes up to roughly 44 million. Of that, we're only transferring 35.6. And it's an assumption that we're using. And that's something that we can fluctuate. We can decide to transfer the whole $43.7 million, or we can only transfer, same as 23, 24, which is at 27. That's the decision. Additional
Technically, I know that, but if we were to do that, we would be breaking our own SIP reserve policy.
Yes.
So what I'm trying to get at is I would love to see a new line item here
Mm-hmm.
now that we have a SIP reserve policy of what is the targeted
Yes.
figure.
Yes.
And
We'll put that in.
actually 2 rows. What's the targeted and what's the actual, right? So making up numbers, if 65 million is the target, and it will change in future years, I get that. And our actual goes from, I don't know what, to 20 million to 40 million. It shows that we're building towards that target. But right now, it isn't clearly stated. And I think it will help everyone if we do that. I understand completely. So what you've described with 25, 26, how close to the reserves target policy, SIP reserves target policy, is 58 million?
We'll put those lines in so that it's clear.
Oh, I was just wondering if you had a general.
Oh, it's if you were to add last 3 years, that's roughly about 160, $170 million is the target, and we're at 58.
Which is one reason why you're making the prudent assumption that we only transfer 35.6 million so that we can stay true to building up that reserve level, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions on the 5-year forecast? So we talked about this a little bit already. We are going to be asking for 3 scenarios from the departments in order to understand where and how we can make reductions in order to hit this gap. We, as all of you know, have to present you with a balanced budget. That means we have to find a solution to this gap. And our intention is also to start working towards that SIP reserve. So the combination of those 2 things is why we landed on this number. We'll be working with our team over the course of the next 2 to 3 months in order to determine what those options are. And we'll continue to talk through those options with you as we're going into your policy setting in January.
And so that scenario discussion and getting your board's guidance, December, January, key dates for you to set the direction to the county administrator for this budget process.
And is it on those 2 key dates that we're looking at whether or not we include library? And
There's no decision points today. This is really the first look, asking more questions, more information. It is very helpful. I'm going to underscore very helpful to have a general understanding of the direction in December for our departments to start to do work. So that's where in the roundtable, the word affirming budget direction in January, I want to underscore it's affirming because departments, based on your roundtable discussion in December, departments are already going to do the work. And given the work that we're going to be asking them as county administrator, I would like to give them as much time as possible.
what about our partners outside of town?
So, what was that?
This is public information at this point.
This is public information. I have scheduled just as I have previously to hold a budget update for city managers, special district managers, CBOs, and I do that this time of year and then also once the budget's released.
So last year, 2 years ago, it was 4, 7, and 10. And then for this current fiscal year,
Flat 3 and 5.
and I'll just say at this juncture, I'm interested in seeing a 10. I don't know if that'll be the high end or the middle end.
Given the percentages, there will have to be somewhere at least around a 10, and there will have to be another one much higher than that too.
Just so you all are internalizing this side of the table's work dates, December 4th is when we'll be presenting to the directors, and they will be starting their budget process. So when we come to you in the roundtable, they will already have information about where this is and where we're trying to get to. Your policy direction at that point will allow them to submit then in January.
And Chair, you said you were asking GR to provide an update from Vince Boyack about federal dollars. And what was that?
Not just federal dollars, it's federal policies. I'll just give you a couple of examples. Candidate Trump talked about mass deportation, and what we don't know policy-wise is what the federal immigration department may expect from state and county sheriffs in support of that. And also we have needs here at the state, where we have state laws that the sheriff has to deal with as well. There have been other policy proposals around getting rid of certain aspects of Medicare. And so here we've done a lot of work on Medicare 1115 waivers. That affects our homeless program, but it also affects our jail. So we won't have clarity at that meeting, but we do need to calibrate ourselves in terms of what are some of the possible scenarios. We don't know how quickly it could be activated, but the way it will be influenced by the final election results and what a new Congress looks like as well. So it is our first step in preparation. And I feel very confident in saying it will become clearer to us in 2025. But I think being mindful of this, it's just starting to normalize new federal directions, right? Another policy that I think may not affect us directly is eliminating the Department of Education. That could affect Head Start. So, there are just various things. Yeah, absolutely.
Where does that fit in our timeline of budget plan, that meeting with Vince Boyack? Is it in between those two meetings, do you think?
I think the best we can do is start with this initial process in January through the supplemental roundtable. And as we're going through identifying more about the funding that we get through the state and also through additional direct federal grants, just be mindful as that's it. We're just building our knowledge base. I don't see that we're going to have any clarity for building our proposed 25-26, but it's starting to lay that foundation of information.
Other question that I assume we'll have more information about as we move forward to this is what's happening with SHS and a potential measure in May. So I'm thinking about how that fits in.
That is special fund resourcing versus all this discussion about general fund. Yep. Hence our work session next Tuesday. The good news is, if there can be a good news in having a $20 million gap, It's less than last year's $25 million gap, which was less than the previous year's $30 million gap.
Last year's was just over 10 million. The year before was 25. So,
Oh, I must be
yeah,
looking
no.
at the,
yeah.
oh,
It-
yes, I'm looking at the too far back, look back.
So I think the good news is the work the board has done over the last 2 years, while we do have a budget gap, have really continued to help as challenging as it's been and has been. The board's
So
been
for the
responsive.
December roundtable, it would be really good to summarize both summary of what those problems, those gaps were for the last 2 fiscal years, and also what other foundation building, typo on preparation, we've had, because what it represents to me is we've made hard decisions before while advancing the state of the organization and its ability to serve our community. And I have confidence that we'll be able to continue problem solving that.
So I do just want to highlight a couple of things as we're going into the scenario preparation. We've talked about the first 2 bullets in some depth. So all departments are going to have to propose cuts. The second piece is that we're going to be working with you in December and January on priorities. The third and the fourth is a piece that I think Lisa is here to talk a little bit about today, which is that one of the things that we are finding is that, as discussed with the PERS pickup portion of the budget, when we are investing in employees, we see more retention. And when we're not investing in employees, we see turnover. There's a really high cost to turnover. And so in these scenarios, we are proposing to do a couple of things. One is we're asking the departments to actually preserve a training budget for employees, just as a presentation. What often happens in cuts is that people go for things that they feel like they can do without removing FTE. But how we invest in our employees who are here is really important, or they too will leave.
So I'm actually going to be a bit more direct than that. Over the last 2 years, we have such dedicated employees that departments have put forward cuts to preserve services to the community.
Yep.
That has come at a cost of investment in our workforce in the future. We need to ensure that our employees have access to training at all levels of the organization. And as Anne said, Lisa will talk to what is that cost of turnover, and not making that investment is significant.
Then number 4 is why we've also proposed the PERS pickup piece of this.
Yeah, thank you.
It can't just be the PERS pickup. We have to support training, which means that has to include the travel to said training. We just got to do it. And I'm ready to do the hard work. I just need better data to support that.
Okay, thank you. My name is Lisa Taggage, for the record, and I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer for Washington County. And in preparation for today's roundtable, did a little bit of research with some more scholarly articles regarding retention and the cost of turnover. And there's a July of 2024 Gallup article. As you know, Gallup does nationwide surveys, and part of that is on with employers with employee satisfaction surveys. And interestingly, when polled, one out of 2 employees are open to other employment, like switching employers. So that's half the workforce would be open to that. When we talk about the cost of turnover, it's a combination of direct costs and hard costs and indirect soft costs, sorry. And looking at SHRM, and SHRM is a nationwide human resources professional association. And they have estimated, and it depends really as to the scale of the job, for the lower level, less skilled jobs, the cost is less. For your more technical or professional, more highly skilled positions, it's more. And for a job that pays about $60,000, you may spend $180,000 in recruitment and soft costs associated with that transition. 30 to 40% of those costs are hard costs. The remaining 60 to 70% are indirect costs. And so hard costs could be the cost in recruitment. Sometimes you use an outside recruiter, there's internal staff. The location, just payouts that occur for exiting employees on accrued banks, and then, restarting those over with new employees. So just from salary and benefit costs. Additionally, there's soft costs in loss of productivity that can occur from decreased morale with turnover, can really, shake up a team when you have turnover. There's also morale issues with, carrying the work during the gap of employment. And so where you see recruitments, they take, 3 to 6 months, depending on the level and type of position, or, whether the recruitment took 1 or 2 times if there's a failed recruitment to fill a position. And then that time period in which team members are supporting a new employee, helping them transition into the team. And so you're looking at increased workload for employees anywhere from, 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year, before that person's fully transitioned in. And so that burnout can cause the domino effect, and where others can leave or be open to leaving because of job dissatisfaction. And probably no surprise, like the top 3 things that items for an employee that is important to them in their retention with an employer is salary and benefits, work-life balance, and then their manager and how they're managed. And according to that Gallup survey I previously mentioned, 30%, which was the higher of all the things that they surveyed, 30% of employees reported that salary and benefits was the most critical piece of retention for them.
Lisa, the assessment you're reporting out, is this specific to Washington County employees, or is this a general national level?
This is nationwide, based on Gallup and SHRM. They do SHRM does benchmarking nationwide across employers that respond.
So Washington, I'm going to kind of the Washington County has, to my knowledge, has not previously conducted an all-employee survey.
That's
We are
the
moving
next question
forward.
I was going to ask.
We are moving forward with a Washington County all-employee survey.
And we know that Clean Water Services has been using it for the last few years. Could you please repeat those 3 factors that employees say influences their decisions?
Yes, compensation and benefits. And then, oh my gosh,
Competitive salary.
yeah, well, that's the first one, yes.
No, that's the first one.
They're managers, and then
That was the third one.
Work-life balance.
oh, work-life balance. Thank you.
Put you on the spot.
Thank you. Yes.
I'll make a quick comment. In the accounting business, it's 3 to 1. That's what we have. So if you pay somebody $100,000, it's costing you $300,000 to replace it. Very similar. Very similar to what you're citing in the Gallup. Only 30% of it is salary and benefits. Most of it is other things. And it's the environment. Do they get along with their supervisor? Do they think they're appreciated? Is there opportunity for growth? There's a lot of things that go into that. So it depends on the type of credentialization, but it's very different things. So I would suspect here at your management levels, people, they're not going to see a lot of salary difference. They're going to see maybe opportunities for advancement or other things that they perceive of value. Your point's well taken. If you don't pay compensation, I don't care what we put in there, 4% or 2%, you're not paying the market, you're not going to get anybody. So that's a point well taken.
I'd also add that those factors can be magnified by the degree of the issues in the workplace. For example, you made the comment about when somebody leaves, others have to pick up the load. How long does that go? How many, we look at the jail in relationship to double overtime. And those are critical factors. And they magnify above compensation and benefits if they're too far out of whack.
So I'd like to see, there's 2 things about this. One is nowhere in those 3 does it talk about how they like what they're doing. And I'd like to see how much this has changed from 10 years ago, because COVID did a number on the employer-employee relationships. And I think this is an indication of that. So what did we look like 10 years ago? Because I'd like to think we're going to start seeing a transition back to balance. But again, how much are we challenging and providing enjoyable work to our employees versus how much we're paying them and the work-life balance? I mean, I think the work-life balance is a big deal. That's not going to go away, but yeah, I guess just making sure that we are challenging our employees to do what they love to do. I don't see that in here.
So Metro used Gallup for years and years in terms of the reports compared to the annual employee survey. And these three factors continue to be three of the main factors out of the whole top five. So there isn't, what changes is the percent contribution and the flex. What I would like to underscore here is to improve the situation. That's why we've invested in the class and comp project, but also in training, right? Our training program here at Washington County is still very young. But I want to make sure that we've done a good job of training up the managers and then sustaining their energy as managers as well. So those who have been managers for a while, how do we keep them on a positive trend, right? Versus those that may be new to management over the last 3 to 5 years. How have we ensured that they've gotten training in at least basic management, you know, first line, middle managers and so forth. And I don't know if we're where we need to be at or if we need to invest some more in that.
I want to apologize. Lisa has to leave because ironically she's going into an interview that she doesn't want to be late for the candidate experience. So I know she didn't want to get up in the middle of that conversation. So just on the training employee experience, we'll work with Ms. Tackett just on a follow-up to the board on that. And I will say we're not where we need to.
Do you think that the employee satisfaction assessment will be done in time to help us get informed into the budget decisions that we're going to embark on in 2025?
We'll follow up with the timing on that survey.
But we are working on it.
That's great news.
Okay, so this is just a reminder, taking you back to last year, and we copied and pasted. So your budget principles from fiscal year 25, this is the list. These can be changed, amended. We will be making some proposals as a team to you in December. And then this are your budget priorities. I want to talk about the two that we crossed off and the reasons for those. The first is we've developed the community strategic plan for the time being. We did the update and we've now been implementing work plans. We will be bringing this back in 3 years. It's a 5-year plan. So our intention is to be coming back to the board at that time to re-up the strategic plan. And then support equitable economic development through federal rescue plan funds. We actually are going into the spend down. So you see the bullet right underneath that is how do we start spending down those funds and making sure that we hit the thresholds and the goals that you all have set for us over the course of the next 2 years. So it's going to keep going. That work is important. It's going to keep happening, but it's happening in that bullet.
Since you're going to upload an amended presentation, when I was reading the materials emailed to us yesterday, when I saw these crossed out, I said, wait a minute, we did this.
We did.
So rather than have a check mark, rather than crossed out.
Happy to.
Yeah, I was like,
we can do that.
Wait a minute. Yeah, I was like, we did this.
Done. Yeah. rather than
Done.
Not just check mark, but done. And the second one,
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
in the budget, it says fund immediate needs for 24/7 public safety facilities. We're done.
We are.
We have funded that.
We have signed contracts.
So that one should be crossed out too.
Yep. Okay. This is just as a reminder placeholder. We'll be back in December with more information on these.
Whoa, wait a sec.
Oh, yeah.
That is oh, that's a draft set.
Yep.
These are draft.
Okay. There was a longer list in the budget document.
Okay. We'll talk with the team and we'll make sure you have the full list for that.
They don't
period.
match.
Yeah,
Oh.
my handwritten notes.
And we'll follow up also with email so that you all can be thinking about this just in advance of the December roundtable.
Okay. This is what we have on, oh, yes, sir.
I just refreshed my memory of some priorities for the connected multimodal transportation system. What is that?
Support the board allocation of funds to transportation operations and capital improvements.
It's not multimodal.
Yes, it is. Bike lanes, sidewalks.
Yep.
Uh,
What we do with,
I was thinking
Yep.
buses like this. Okay.
no, we have our transit service plan.
Okay.
Yep, it's in there and that's the same as last time.
Yep.
What's missing? Deliver public safety and justice services in a way that builds community trust? Or was there a second page?
That
Yeah.
was the first.
And much more.
Support major systems of county government, including capital improvement planning, finance, and from IT and HR. We still have some more work to do there. And then proposals for new or expanded services must include new revenue. This one, that was in last year's. But I'm not comfortable with the way that's worded for a draft for this year. Because we know we're already struggling in many areas with underfunded and unfunded mandates. And then there's the cost, the expenditure level for implementing funded mandated services. So I think there's something about how to problem solve our priorities.
We can come up with draft
Yep,
language
we will.
for your December conversation.
Okay.
For now, what we'll do is we'll send you the full list. So I think that was just our clerical error, probably just fitting into the space that aligns with your budget document, including just the discussion points we had just talked about. We'll send that to your email because I would encourage you all to start thinking about this in prep for the December meeting.
We're gonna have a robust conversation about the new draft.
In December, at your December roundtable.
So it's the first bullet item on December 5th.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
So the draft budget principles are the same as last year's.
The ones on this
Comparing.
slide are.
Yes.
Correct.
Okey.
This is what's coming.
Finalized budget direction?
It's not the affirm, it's,
You're finalizing and then affirming your decisions on January 9th.
I feel like solidify is a better word than finalize.
we can do that.
We can change that.
So you said that staff are going to start the conversation December 4th, start their work on this?
So we present a large number of items in that opening meeting. We'll be discussing what the narratives are going into the budget book. So what the expectations are for consistency and thematic experience with the book. We're going to be talking about the equity tool, the budgeting tool for assuring equity into our budget items. We'll be talking about these cuts and the scenario expectations with staff. And then we will be opening that team up for, I believe, 8 weeks for them to submit their budget. So this is, it is the start of Questica Open for them to start thinking about and talking to their team about their needs for the coming year.
I think it would be helpful if you could take the snapshot from the budget calendar that we have and take it out to February. So we've got December, January, then to the beginning of February. So we don't, I mean, I finally put together my own.
I just feel like you're giving them direction on December 4, and we are having the conversation on December 5.
So can I clarify some language? We open the budget. That's a mechanical opening the budget.
Okay.
And staff there's a lot of behind the scenes time. So what happens at that point in time, personnel costs are loaded, our cost allocation plan is loaded, and we talk with the team. Here's what the board has discussed. Here's the gap. We will not be able to give any scenario direction at the December meeting. We will be able to say at the December 5th, we'll be discussing the scenarios with the board where they will be solidifying the direction. And then January 9th, they affirm the budget direction, principles, and priorities. But there's behind the scenes work that staff can be doing.
So it isn't as bad as it was verbalized. This has been the plan. It's more clearly stated here in the plan than the verbalization led to believe.
Is that helpful?
Yeah. December 5 is going to be here really quick, especially since I'm goofing off 15 days between.
This is the kind of sequence that we've used previously.
I'm not questioning.
Okay.
Okay. I'm questioning what I feel like I need to do to prepare for that conversation. So, and you know, I'm not recommending we do anything differently. I'm just saying I have a lot of questions. And I'm not sure I'm going to have them ready by December 5th, but that's okay.
There's the space for all those questions.
Yeah, I see that. See that? That's my brain right now. So.
Empty.
Yes.
And I have a question, previous slide. The December 5th, second bullet point, we changed that word to solidify. Could you help me understand, like, what are we solidifying?
We have to solidify what the scenarios are going to be.
So we'll get a presentation that says this is the recommended scenarios, make a decision, go.
Yep.
January 9th is a firm go.
So it hasn't been said here. I haven't heard it said. So I'm going to come back to it because as Ms. Angie and I problem solve the sequence of bringing things to the board and the sequence, you know, teeing conversations up amongst the board, recognizing that we, in prior budget years, you know, early in our tenure, we were talking about how it was a lean organization. And we've done a lot of foundation building while our population has grown, so the service needs have increased. And as documented through our GR report out, including the data that the Public Safety and Justice white paper put together, not just in public safety and justice, but also in other areas. The state has added in mandates or continued to underfund other areas. For example, because Joe is sitting here, the level of revenue grant that assessment and taxation gets from the state has dropped significantly over the last 5-10 years. So what I have heard Ms. Angie say is that it means that we're looking at more of an organization that is anemic, and that word conjures up that there's certain nutrients that we've been going without. We've already, to use the language here, it's things like class and comp training, and really asking the workforce to take on more within our constrained budgets. Well, I frankly, looking at where we're at and the forecasts and the needs of our community, I think some parts of our agency are really gaunt. And then there are some services that we're simply going to have to entertain. Let me be sure everybody's hearing my language. We're going to have to entertain scenarios of what does it look like if certain parts of our service level goes away, goes to zero, because we have to be able to adopt a balanced, Ms. Angie has to deliver a balanced proposed budget to us by the end of April, and we need to adopt balanced budget by June, and then we need to make sure that we continue on the path of revenue and expenditure lines not having a gap over the next 3 years. So I am really very proud of how our organization, the staff, has done tremendous foundation building, and that we as a board have made those investments. And I know you're not done implementing them. But I have hopes that the scale of efficiencies will be felt. The workload, hopefully in various organizations, will feel a little easier to do, more effective, more efficient, because of the investment that we've been making in things like the ERP, right? And throughout, I just use that as one example. You know, the certainty that we hope to have with the bonding we're doing on MISTIP D and E, and the fact that we have approved the next approximately $250 million of projects with 3F. And, you know, I don't want to leave anyone left out. Health and Human Services has been doing great work. We know that the state provides a lot of funding there. We're trying to figure out what happens if the state doesn't continue to provide revenue that meets the cost curves and things like that. So we just have a lot to figure out. But I know we can do it.
Let me just share what I shared with directors yesterday. And I want to tie to when I delivered the budget message to your budget committee and board, and through budget committee discussions last year. I also shared that we are at bone. We're at bone with the past cuts that we've made. So this year it is what you will see services being stopped. You will see maybe a service was delivered at a gold standard and now it's going to bronze. You may see a whole wide variety of discussions options being brought forward within the proposed budget. We can no longer ask our employees, and I said this last year, to do more. They can't do more. And I want to compliment, and he's sitting here, Joe Nelson, of the journey A&T has been on over the past three years. When I challenged him, find every efficiency you can. And in our monthly meetings, he reports back with all their efficiency and what they're doing. But that time's up. And so A&T there are required services. And even in A&T, we are going to need to be looking at what don't we do at the gold standard anymore, and that conversation will be across all general fund service areas and departments.
One of the things that I worry a little bit about this presentation and how both our community as well as our employees may be viewing this is we haven't reflected here that we have a very aggressive state legislative agenda and a federal legislative agenda. The state legislative agenda, and you're going to hear me repeat this the morning of December 5th, a theme of no more unfunded or underfunded mandates, no more increases of expectations without the funding to accompany it. At the federal level, we've been very clear about what are the earmarks that we're going for in order to fund different community needs here in Washington County. So this is just on the budget landscape. We continue to use those other programs to try and bring more to the revenue and problem-solving content for the budget. We just wanted to make sure employees and even our senior staff know that's not forgotten.
Points I'd like to make, I'm gonna make them to Ann, because you're now inheriting that whole financial area. I sent to Greg Munn a list of questions, and with his leaving, he didn't quite get back to me, but I just want to pick out two things which are important. I can send you the list again. A lot of it was just my edification, but I think for any board, it's very helpful if you could develop a tool to kind of simplify things, to show the hydraulics. If we take and we move this up or down, what's it mean in terms of costs or additional budget adjustment we need to make. So if we had a tool like that, it would be very helpful. And the other large one I said about assumptions, it's not really clear even today where you have a 4.25% increase in revenue. You're making assumptions on costs on each of your assumptions. I don't know what the increase in those assumptions, what the percentage is and what the total actual costs are. So it's kind of hard unless, I mean, I do this for a living and you have accountants and I'm looking at this stuff and saying that it's really hard to connect. And so in terms of presentation for January on, you might want to have some tool that allows the board to kind of tinker, the old exercise where if you had $1, how would you spend it? Well, you don't get to then pick $1.50, you got $1. So if you had a tool, so I'm being redundant. And secondly, what are these assumptions that you're making? Because in financial forecasting, very difficult. You guys are doing a very good job of trying to figure that out. It's an impossible task with assumptions, but what are the costs of each of these assumptions? So it's helpful. So anyway.
Please send me the email. I would appreciate it. And then I think this is actually the perfect moment to say, I am not your future CFO. But we do have someone who is going to step into the role for the next little bit. And I'm going to turn it over to Tanya to make that announcement.
Yep. This will be in your inbox shortly. So I'm pleased to announce that John Steyer has agreed to serve as the interim Chief Financial Officer. John is currently the Administrative Manager for the Service Office, where he has led the Business Administration team for the last 5 years. Over that time, John's work has supported the development of the Sheriff's Office $179 million budget, managed the department's service contracts, and provided various liaison duties across our One Washington County team. I am confident in John's knowledge and skills in Washington County's financial systems and processes. Prior to coming to Washington County, John served over 30 years in the U.S. Army. In his early military career, John served in aviation through the 1990s in various locations and instructed Army Aviation Advanced Course. He's held several senior positions, managing a $750 million annual budget in the Reserve Officers Training Programs. He's also helped analyze and review the $20 billion annual budget of the Installation Management Program Evaluation Group, headquartered at the Pentagon. More recently, John served from 2014 to 2016 as the branch chief of infrastructure and finance at NATO and Belgium from 2016 to 2018 as the comptroller of the Army's European Command, Germany. John's skill and his experience may not be known broadly to many, but we are grateful that he's willing to step into this role during this time and also support your board. So that email will be in your inbox shortly.
My goodness, if John was in the room now, I would have been standing up and saluting him. That's very impressive background.
He is, and he brings a humbleness and a grace that I also really value and appreciate. So we are deeply appreciative of his willingness to step in. He had a chance to meet with Greg Munn before leaving, and it's helpful to the team, to all of us, for him to step into that support role. It's also an opportunity. I just want to highlight, we have some managers in that team that are also exceptional, Steve being one of them. Ethel is continuing to do great work on the financial side of the house, working on our audits and our day-to-day transactions. And then we have Susie, who's also working on our purchasing and so it takes a village to lead this team forward. I really appreciate all of them stepping up at this time as we're in transition.
I will also note that John stepping into interim due to the strong team he has built also allows one of the sheriff's office team members to step into an interim role. And so this is a great example of giving individuals opportunities for growth and leadership here in Washington County. His first day, just so everyone knows, is November 23rd. Until then, I'll be working with Steve and the team and serving downstairs. But again, I don't have John's background, so I'll be doing my best. Thank you all.
Well, I do want to ask a couple questions. I share some of the, December 5th will be here before we know it, kind of thinking with Commissioner Willie. But to start with the personnel cost and the health insurance premium and the PERS, I value making sure that we offer competitive compensations. But when you do come back, Tanya, I'd like to understand how the county is going to control these costs, or what's our plan. I think the next 4 years, 5 years, or 3 years, whatever the projection, the two different projections that you showed. So that's one thing. And then the other question I have.
So Nafisa, we can come back with more information. I frankly, I'm very proud of the strategies we've put in place for health insurance. Most organizations are not seeing a 10% increase. So we are trying to
more.
Yes, yeah, much higher.
30% for City of Portland.
And the inflationary cost and workforce shortages absolutely have affected Washington County's personnel cost and every other cost of other agencies. That's all connected as we look at our full class and comp strategy as we get that study. It is about market, and it's also about having the structure in place. And so we will summarize that information for you, and I think we've done a great job here.
I think you've done a phenomenal job of giving us that information to date, year over year over year.
this is you, Steve. I know how difficult it is being in that business, transitioning in between, leaders, so to speak. Thank you for your effort and the staff. I mean, accounting folks always are somewhere down in the bowels doing what they do, but they're pretty necessary. So I've watched what you've done, and you're doing a really good job. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then I have two more questions. I agree with what Commissioner Rogers said. I don't want to, but the other understanding that I like to have is sort of the prioritization that you'll embark on with departments and how that will minimize community impact or essential services. So I'd like to have an understanding. And then the last question is, I'd like to get a visibility into like what criteria that will be used to assess effectiveness of the departmental cuts, the scenarios that you're going to present. I'd like to have more understanding of what criteria you'll be using to sort of assess some of these cuts so that we can really make those hard decisions that.
So that's really I would say, I would ask you and your fellow colleagues to really look at the budget principles and priorities because you set the budget direction to me. I will say, and I'm going to repeat what I said before, this cut will have impact. There is no way to prevent that impact. We have tried to minimize the impact as much as we have, and many employees have increased caseloads. They've done everything, and we can't. There's no way. So will there be cuts in this budget? Do I predict that the community will see and feel yes? Yes.
Unavoidable now. We've
So
done everything.
Yep. So, and I am happy to make sure that is clear once staff, in the staff presentation in December as well.
Yep.
It's unfortunate. But in budgets 2+2, I say budgets 2+2 has to equal 4.
Does it?
The same as the audit.
There you go.
2+2 equals 4, and county administrators require
Does it? Really?
to provide you a balanced budget for your consideration, as well as you adopt a balanced budget.
Any other questions? I really appreciate this time, and I really appreciate both Joe and Steve. Brenda isn't sitting up here today, but Brenda was super helpful in preparing for today.
Yeah. I would also like to come back, Ms. Angie, to one of the questions that Commissioner Fye asked about criteria to assess effectiveness of cuts. We have to propose those. So work on how you would assess the effectiveness of the cuts.
Thank you, Chair. Okay.
We have to provide the direction, as she said. It means take all the things that you talked about, turn it around.
Thank you. That's how we do that. Oh, I should say I'll try.
What's interesting about the position that we're in, and as we talk about the fact that our communities are going to feel this, that's where we are. That's also the point of where things have the potential to change in terms of some of the limitations that we're under. And it's not until, and what I'm getting to is measure 550, until the community feels things, we won't be able to make any changes in our revenue sources. So I'm just pointing that out, that it's very hard, but we're operating, the effects of those two measures have been exponential. And as over the last few years, with the increases with inflation, with all the other pieces and the needs going so high, we've really felt the pressure. And it's not until we all feel the pressure that we can make those changes, I believe.
Board, any other comments to come back to or to get out on the table? Anne was doing the wrap up of thanking all the staff who contributed to get us here. I think what you heard is this was a really good snapshot of where we're at. We'd like a little bit more information in order to shape up the direction to solidify the budget direction, December 5th. So what may be useful is look for commissioners to look back at the set of information from the December roundtable last year, as well as the January roundtable of last year, and see, based upon these new assumptions, what if that would help generate questions for you to bring into the December 5th roundtable. And you could certainly send your questions in advance to Ms. Angie, but that's one reason why we've tried to make sure that December 5th we have enough time for discussion.
And within a week, we will send you the updated graphs that were requested. In addition, you'll receive the full set of the principal's priorities. So we'll send that in one package email so that it's easy for you to just track and access.
Question on the election, Joe, so I didn't want him to get away. Certainly. Oh, now? Dan, so we don't hear it in some other state. It was overvotes on certain races. What does that mean?
One more time, please.
Overvotes, I'm sorry. On certain races, there are overvotes listed. What does that mean?
What I'd like to do, I'd like to get a written response for you for that one.
Oh, okay.
That way, and I can send it out to the entire board because that may be
Sure.
more than
Yeah.
I want to talk about right here in public. It's a public answer, but I just want to make sure that we get the best information for you.
However, just curious.
I think it would also help if in that email, you also put in writing what the schedule is that you articulated on Tuesday for results. I do recall hearing Fridays late in the day. Generally, you aim for about 4 o'clock. But there are some folks who get used to the fact that on election night, there are multiple updates, and then the next couple of days comes around and they're like, where's the update? It's like, we're on a Friday schedule now. We're on a Friday schedule now.
And we do have that schedule set up that we laid out ahead of time with the caveat that if the board wants additional reporting, it's your discretion.
I think we got a lot of work to do as it is.
I'll include that, and what the chair is referring to is what I shared out in my leadership update. So,
yeah. I knew I'd heard it. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm connecting dots.
It's awesome. Keep going. This is our first presidential election with the postmark for ballots. So it will be setting a baseline for what the return rates might be like for a presidential election year with the postmark date. And I understood from Marnie. Come on up, Marnie. Between you and Joe, I think this is worth sharing. The team did a very impressive job making sure they helped folks find ballot boxes, get ballots in, but also Marnie shared with me, I think it was yesterday, what it was like at the elections office. So I thought it might be useful for the board to hear that.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. For the record, Marnie Kyle, I'm one of the ACAs. And I think what I shared yesterday was a long time ago, but I think what I shared is there was just a really nice, it was very, very busy, but there was a great atmosphere both among staff and the visitors. Everything was very smooth. We had great support from the sheriff's office and from Hillsborough Police Department in particular at the elections office. Lots and lots of questions being asked and answered in a very calm way. And and the staff in the back area, every time I went back there, they're just excited to be there and excited to be participating in the process. And I don't know if I shared this, but Joe and I actually got to participate and do they told me I was qualified to do one task, which was when they dump all the ballots out from being collected, they all have to be organized so that they're all facing the same direction. And they decided I was qualified to help with that. And I did pass. So Joe and I actually got to be back there and really participating. And it's a great opportunity to hear all the buzz from staff. So thank you for allowing us to share that.
I think
Volunteers.
it's the level of busyness.
Yeah, busyness and volunteers from across the organization and the community. And yeah, it was a great.
Speaking to the level of busyness, a new term I learned is ballot dust. And what that refers to is the machine was working so hard. And if you think paper continuing to, there's dust.
Yep.
There's that comes out. And so every so often they'd have to shut the machine off and vacuum out the dust. But that's how fast the machines were working too.
And the staff. You know what?
I don't know if you have in the rolling agenda any plans to come back in the first half of the year. Notice I said first half of the year with just a summary of the 2024 election and the ballot, like how many registered voters there were over the last 3 presidential cycles. Just take that 3 cycles. The number of different ballot types you had, the number of voters pamphlet statements you printed, and then for ballot returns, it might be interesting to see if you still have the data, and it doesn't have to be those every 4 years even, but it might just be interesting to see the difference between this presidential 2024 cycle with the postmarked date versus the 2021, the 2020 instance. Also a presidential election, but people had to get their ballots submitted to a ballot box by 8 p.m. And I don't know if that has, what the trend looks like. Now, certainly that's not the only thing that affects how folks return a ballot, you know, the number of races, the number of measures, all of that, how busy people's lives are affects when they return their ballot. But I think it would be interesting just to see the trend line. It gives us an appreciation of the tremendous work that your team and all of the additional volunteers isn't the right word, but the community members who join the elections team, the seasonal, so to speak, workforce.
I really appreciate all the comments, and it really is a Team One Washington County effort. Some of the groups that really behind the scenes helped out. We had the director of IT on site with his team. We had facilities issues that immediately they got on it. There's so many people participated. The sheriff's office was just amazing. All the different law enforcement agencies. I can't speak highly enough for all the partnerships that we really received. So it really is a one Washington County team approach to the community, the volunteers. Everybody came together. So it's wonderful.
Well, I know you're still processing ballots and getting to the final results on December 2nd. So keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Fye had a question too.
More like a comment of an experience I had with your office, the election office, Joe. Positive experience I had. I signed up for a ballot tractor.
Ballot tracks.
Ballot tracks, yes. Thank you, Chair. And I was anxious, this was a pretty big deal election. And for some reason, I assumed I would get so I did my ballot, I dropped it off, and I didn't get the next day. I think I was pretty anxious, so I'll put it out there. The next day, I didn't get my notification, so I picked up the phone and called the election office, and I had a really wonderful experience with the staff, front desk people that picked up my call. So I wanted to just extend that experience, positive experience, and appreciate the election staff. And she was able to help me and say, yeah, you're on the tracks to get your ballots, notifications. And she was able to check and ballot received, and the notification was coming immediately anyway. So I just, I appreciated that, and great job. And I was really prepared to have a long phone call wait, and I did not. So
Well, this is the opportunity to not only encourage folks to sign up for ballot tracks, but there are personalized settings for your individual account. So it may be that you have not activated notifications by text, notifications.
I did an email.
Yep.
Now I have a text set up. Yeah, I learned a lot. I've always had an email, but now I'm going to do text because you're anxious, then you wait for the text. So yeah, lesson learned.
It's a great system. And I learned this cycle somehow with, I think it's Multnomah County, after your ballot, I can't remember which stage, if it's accepted or will be counted, you get a digital I voted sticker.
Ooh.
So you might want to look into that.
Next.
For future possibilities. Instant gratification.
Yeah, project for IT for further collaborating with the elections office.
Yes, it's very important.
Anything else for today, folks? All righty. With that, we will adjourn today's roundtable. Thank you. Oh, and don't